Why are people so judgmental about people living with their parents? In previous generations, there was much more of an expectation that people would only be living at home if they were struggling financially. The idea was that moving out and getting your own place was a rite of passage, showing that you are a mature adult capable of supporting yourself. There's a lot of people who were raised with that idea in mind. And from their perspective, someone who still lives with their parents must be incapable of supporting themselves, and thus come across as immature. I believe you are correct that in today's economy, staying with your parents can often be the pragmatic solution, and isn't necessarily a sign that you aren't mature enough to take care of yourself. But many people still believe that to be the case. I think the stigma of living with parents is fading away as the price for a home and even just rent is skyrocketing with wages that aren't following. I think you are sitting at home playing Fortnite eating Doritos for the 4,568th day in a row. You have an issue. But if you're working and providing something for society, there isn't an issue. Most other countries, there's 24 generations in one household. You do all that. On the other hand, Joe, 23, still lives at home, is unemployed and does nothing but play video games and eat Cheetos. He refuses to shower, do laundry, mow the lawn, or even load the dishwasher. This is the image of still living at home in your 20s a lot of people have. I'm fairly certain a lot of it is based in propaganda. Paint everyone living with family as the loser in every movie and book, and people will follow the example. And then, young people will rush into underpaid job to pay for their own apartment, and then rush into debt to get their own house. It's extremely silly that it's cheaper to pay a mortgage on a house than it is to pay most apartment rents. It creates a trap for a lot of people to never own a house. Staying at home and saving money is the sensible, reasonable thing to do. And in many places around the world, that is normalized. It's extremely common in some Asian countries, for example, to live at home until you marry. Only then do you get your own place. But, outside of propaganda, it's also the natural inclination of wanting freedom and privacy. As one grows older, not every parent-child relationship is the same, and some can be quite stifling even if it is a loving one. And if people go to live in a dorm for college, they get a taste of that freedom. And for a lot of people, going back home to live with their family isn't something they can live with without going crazy. And since they can't get along with their parents in that way, they cannot imagine anyone else doing it either. So they imagine you like you're a 10-year-old still doing what your mother tells you to do. Living in your parents' basement has become a cliché for someone who has no ambition to provide for themselves and be an adult. Like all clichés, there might have been a tiny bit of truth in its origin, but it's obviously a false generalization, especially now. It's like living in a trailer park that has negative connotations as well. But it's also necessary for educated, working people in some areas of the country because of housing prices. Or it's like marrying your sister. Oh, wait, that's still bad. So, you can choose to respond to the negative stereotypes. You can ignore it, or you can frame it in a positive way. Instead of saying, I live in my parents' basement, you can say, I renovated unused space in my parents' house as an apartment and it was a really smart financial decision. Own it like a boss. Yet still women I date are extremely opposed to it. Becca Sue, some women are icked out by the thought of making out or having sex in someone's parents' house, whether their parents are home or not. It may not have anything to do with how well you treat your parents. Have you tried saying, I rent an in-law unit attached to my parents' house, instead? It doesn't actually sound like you're living with your parents. You're just in the same building. The judgment is about not having independence and not learning to do basic adult tasks, which might not apply to you. But if you just say, I live with my parents, people are naturally going to jump to that conclusion. The part 1 dislike is women who live at home judging and looking down at men who live at home. IDK. It's stupid. I am 24 and live with my parents. I'm about to graduate from university and get a good paying job. I've still made a deal with my parents to keep living with them for a few years, so that I can save up money to buy my own house. It's not a bad thing coming home every day to people who love you, are genuinely interested in your day, and want to cook meals for you. I love my parents and I enjoy living with them. Just own it. You don't need to tell people you live with your parents until it's relevant. And if people are judgmental, then don't waste your time on them. So long as you're taking responsibility for yourself and not expecting your parents to pay your way, or do your cooking and laundry for you, there's nothing wrong with it. Because we are classist assholes. There's probably a real psychological or sociological term for this, but I think of it as looking at who else is in your category. Because in addition to judging, people like to categorize. I don't mean that like, oh, people are so judgmental. It's just part of how we navigate life. If you see a gang of 6 dudes at the skate park with boards, you're going to think, oh, skaters, and even if it turns out one dude is really not, you're still mostly right, right? So in this case, when people don't know much about you, they put you in the lives with parents category. Fair, right? Then it comes down to what people think about that category, which boils down to general social attitudes like what's already been mentioned. But that's not just some fiction made up out of nowhere. See, in the still lives with parents population, sure, there's you and lots of other totally functional, in societal terms, independent, and so on. But there's also going to be a lot of people who still live at home because of some actual dysfunction. Those stereotypical antisocial dudes. They exist and are just as terrible as the stereotypes portray. And even though you don't have anything else in common with them, you are still in their category. So you get assumed to be like them. Tell the women that you meet that you rent a basement apartment, and it's a pretty good deal. Let them see your living arrangement for themselves. And then say, oh yeah, I rent it from my parents. I have a sold savings account and will be getting my own place as soon as I graduate. I think it's more about the people who just mooch for life, not ones who are helpful. To me, there's a lot of growing up and maturity that comes with being completely on your own. Making, or buying, all of your own meals. Making sure your bills are paid on time. Having to deal with roommates or neighbors and understanding compromise. Etc., etc., etc. The stigma about moving out at 18 seems to be solely a North American mentality. Most every other culture lives with extended family into adulthood. Grandparents would help with childcare and in return children take care of their aging parents. I think there's an archaic stigma attached to living with your parents. It's stupid though. My daughter lives with me. She has a master's degree and a very good job. She could live on her own if she wanted to and has in the past, but I have a 5-bedroom home that is completely paid for. Plenty of room for her and me. She does pay rent and contributes to extra expenses. I.e., the pipes burst at Christmas. She paid $3,000 to get them fixed. She justified that by saying I live here too. She's basically doing me a favor by living with me. Otherwise I'd just be alone. There was a time she got harassed for living with me, but not anymore. No one gives her grief for living with me. Is it because she's female? I don't think so. It's because it just makes sense financially. Judgment is not equal to preference, man. You'll eventually find a gal who doesn't mind your current circumstance or choice. Whichever it may be. If you are fine with it and your parents are fine with it, no big deal. But it's also your date, GF's, hookup's choice to be down for a guy who's cool with that. Versus not. Understandably, you're probably sitting there going, what? Move out now and just rent an apartment for eternity? Well, that wouldn't be my choice. But some would apparently prefer short-term independence over long-term success. What can ya do, mang? Didn't have enough money to move out myself till I was 27. Thought I could after college at 24. Failed after a year. Saved enough and eventually did at 27. Take your time. In my case, I just tell people I'm broke and cannot afford my own place. I'm not lying. Sure, some folks may still be judgmental towards me, but others recognize that if they are being judgmental, it's towards my financial status, rather than my own decision. Also, there is nothing wrong with living with your parents anyways. Even if you had the money to move out. It's all preference. Nobody should. If you get along, why wouldn't you? Saves money. Shit is expensive out there. You're living with people you trust instead of potential crazy random strangers.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Haircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.